Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss the women's basketball collegiate recruiting process and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Coach Allison Spaschak. Allison played for 4 years at Ithaca College. She started her coaching career in 2018 as an assistant coach at SUNY Brockport. In 2020, she was an assistant at Randolph Macon College. And in 2022, Allison found her current home as an assistant at the University of Rochester. And in 2023, Allison was named in the WBCA's 30 under 30 list, which is pretty amazing. So congratulations with that recognition. And if you listened to last week's episode with Sarah Asante, she was also named in the 2023 class of the WBCA's 30 under 30 list. So I guess we're just bringing heavy hitters these past couple weeks. And Allison, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Do you know Sarah? She was at WNL for a while, but I don't know if you were at Macon when she was at WNL.
No, I wasn't. I've heard of her. I know her name, but I've never actually met her.
Okay, cool. I think you all would get along. She was really cool to talk to, and she was just very friendly. So, yeah. All right, cool.
Awesome.
So, yeah, on to the recruiting. So, let's say you're in a gym at one of these tournaments. What is the first thing you notice about a student athlete? Like, what kind of draws you in?
Yeah, I would say the word I keep coming back to is toughness, right? And that can be shown in a variety of ways. I like kids who are not scared of contact on both ends of the floor, that will drive hard to the rim, that defensively will take charges, will get in somebody's grill, that go after rebounds, that sort of thing. That definitely, I think, stands out the most. And then after that, just ability to bounce back from mistakes. Can I tell 2 plays later that you're still upset about that shot you missed, or are you able to bounce back and think about the next play?
Yeah, and in my head, actually, this is like kind of going back because I asked you how to pronounce your last name before we started, and I think I still did it wrong. It's Spaschak, not Spaschak. So I apologize for that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It happens. Like I said, you will not be the last, and you were not the first.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So okay, so toughness. I love that. So like in that answer, you kind of said like mistake response. That was kind of your metric for that toughness. And I know a lot of times with these interviews, we talk a lot about process and not so much on skill. So I kind of want to dive into skill a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So what are some of those fundamental skills that you're looking for a student athlete to have, even like that is like the ticket to entry, even just to get on the list, is like, what are some of those fundamental skills?
Yeah, I mean, the first one sounds pretty basic, but being able to finish with both hands. I see a lot of kids nowadays who are really, really good driving right, but can't really go left. And at the college level, that's going to be scouted pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to finish with both hands, I think having a good handle is really important too. Obviously your level of handle is going to vary based on your position.
Right.
Point guards are going to obviously have to have a elite handle. But in general, like your ability to handle the ball. And then another skill that I think is really important is being able to shoot the ball, not necessarily like threes consistently, but at least having range. So being a threat to be a shooter, and showing that you can at least make an open 15, 17 foot jumper if you're a post, and threes if you're a guard is really essential, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think finishing with both hands, I think, is a big thing. And especially like you said, like you'll be scouted. You might get away with it if you're a first year, the first half of the season, but when you like go into conference play, you play that team a second time, it's going to be kind of locked down at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's being able to go both ways is a really important skill. So I just wanted to kind of like highlight that again. If you think, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, and you mentioned like looking at the class of 25 right now. So because timeline is a question that I get a lot of, like, what are coaches doing when, and what classes are they recruiting? So at at the school where you're at and thinking back to like the other schools where you've been, what does that timeline look like to you in the sense of, so right now we're recording, it's in the middle of March of 2024. I almost said
Yeah.
2023, middle of March of 2024. Like, what are you all focused on? What class are you focused on? Kind of what part of the recruiting process are you focused on?
Yeah. So right now, I would say at Rochester, and I would say mostly for pretty much all high academic schools at the Division III level, we move pretty quickly. So right now, I would say we're getting a lot of our top 2025s on campus for visits this spring. Um, we do that. Then maybe some throughout the summer too. We'll spend like the summer evaling, like, okay, here's our final list of the kids we really want. And then we'll go through like the pre-read process in August. And then by early September is when we're having like our official visits. And a lot of times our class is wrapped up by like, mid-October. We do a lot of our work in early decision. And that's kind of why we wrap up our classes so early.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's true, whether you're an athlete or not at a lot of, the high academic institutions. At some previous places I've been at, it just depends. I mean, some schools have a lot of students who really need to wait until they get their FAFSA information back.
Mm-hmm.
So those schools maybe kids weren't making decisions till around like Christmas time or January. But I would still say everywhere I was, we at least really started getting kids on campus the spring of their junior year.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so a question I got from um like a club organization that listens to the podcast, and you just said it, so it made me think of it, is like, how would you classify, like, the question was like, what is a high academic school? Like, how is that classified?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, a lot of it is based on rankings, like top 40, top 50 schools in the country. A lot of it too is also like based on league. Like, for example, I'll talk about like, obviously, like, athletically is obviously different than academics, right? But you talk about
Mm-hmm.
like the Ivy League. The Ivy League is made up of all elite academic institutions that are all competing athletically together.
Mm-hmm.
The UAA, which is the league Rochester in, is similar to that. We have 8 institutions were founded on the basis of giving student athletes who are getting an amazing academic experience a comparable athletic experience. And like I said, that's what our entire league was founded on. So I would say our league as a whole has that unique academic and athletic balance. But again, it's a lot of it goes back to like, rankings, acceptance rates, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I was assuming as well. But yeah, like rankings, potentially like test scores, acceptance rates, all of those types of things. Um, and okay, so it sounds like right now, or you all work at like a year ahead. So like so you're saying junior year is when you start getting those kids on campus. When do those relationships start to form for you all?
Yeah. I would say it really varies depending on the interest level of the kid. I would say a lot of people start reaching out to us at like the beginning of their junior year. So that whole junior year is when I would really say it starts to form. That summer before, so this would have been like summer 2023 for us. We were still primarily looking at 24s, but would definitely go watch some 2025s. So I would say generally speaking, like the fall, and then it continues to grow, into the spring, and then spring into summer, I would say is when we really have a good idea of like, okay, here's the kids that are really interested in us, and here's the kids that we're really interested in as well.
Mm-hmm. So a kid, this is my assumption of how it's going. So a kid reaches out to you and expresses interest, and then you all maybe hop on a phone call or something like that. Like that's how the relationship starts to progress. And I know we talked a little bit about emails before we started recording, and I think you had some really great tips. So can you kind of repeat what you said about what's helpful for you when a student athlete is reaching out?
Yeah. I mean, just to start off, like I love when student athletes reach out directly to us because it shows they're interested, right? Like going to these big events is really awesome when you just need to get a lot of, names and find talent. But I have no idea if the kid that I'm watching that I really like has any interest in the things Rochester offers, right? But when a kid reaches out and emails me, then it shows that they're interested, right? And I think that that's really helpful for me, that then when I watch their film, I have in the back of my mind, like, okay, well, they've reached out to me. So they obviously have some sort of interest, in U of R and what we offer. As far as like the type of emails, this is kind of what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, is like, there's actually a lot of student athletes nowadays who are getting really creative with how they make their profiles. I've seen like Canva resumes, just different like PDF documents. I've seen, I'm blanking on the name, but those like creative PowerPoints, forget what they're called, but they're like, it's an online PowerPoint.
Like a Prezi.
Prezi, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like I've seen Prezis, I've seen all this cool stuff, right? And how you go about it and like the actual like artistic design of it doesn't fully matter. But I love when I can look at something and have a kid have, what teams they play for, what their stats are, links to their highlights and full game film, what they want to major in, all of that kind of information, because I can look at that in a snapshot and say, okay, like, are you a good fit? Because if I see a kid that has, taking 5 AP classes, has a 4.2 weighted GPA, wants to major in biomedical engineering, I look at those 3 things. And before I even watch their film, I know academically Rochester's a really good fit for them. Mm-hmm. If they don't have a great GPA and they want to major in something that Rochester doesn't even really offer, isn't really known for, then I'm going to kind of be like at the end of the day, like, I don't know if this is going to be the best fit for this student athlete, no matter how talented they are. So having all that information up front is really helpful.
Yeah. And is there a specific time of year that is best for you to receive like those types of emails where a kid is interested, or does it not matter?
I wouldn't say it really matters. As far as like up until what point, I would say when kids, sometimes I get those like, at the beginning of senior year, and I would say that's kind of too late. The sweet spot is probably like right now, right? Like our season's over. We're really just flipping the page to like now focusing on recruiting for the spring and the summer. And we're getting, like I said before, kids on campus right now. So definitely that like March-ish time of junior year, I think is a really good time to get on at least like Division III coaches' radars.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any criteria before you let a kid come on campus, or is it just like, Coach, I'm really interested in Rochester. I would love to get on campus and see what campus is like and meet you and the coaching staff. What does that look like for you all?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold. I mean, we'll get emails like the night before and have a kid say, hey, I'm going to be on campus, interested in basketball, would love to meet with you. And we'll never say no to those kids, right? Because at the end of the day, like, no matter what, our coaching staff really believes in Rochester and what Rochester has to offer. So we want to help, make people understand why this is such a great place, whether they end up playing for our program or not. So we'll always meet with student athletes that way. And then from there, obviously say, okay, next step in the process is we're going to need to see some game film, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, the way it'll work is if a kid emails us, I'll email back. And if I like their film, I'll say, would love to set up a phone call. And then from there, after the initial phone call, then we try and set up a visit.
What are some of those things that you're looking for? Like, so it sounds like, okay, you check the box on, I think they're at least athletically good enough. They have certain fundamental things that we're looking for. Now It's time to see if they're a right fit, maybe from the other 300 degrees of themselves. What are those things that you're looking for when you're speaking to an athlete for the first time on the phone?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always ask some non-negotiable questions. And I learned this actually from my old boss at Randolph Macon, Lindsay Burke. So shout out to her. It's a really, really great way to kind of just right off the bat, figure out what's really important to the kid, right? So like I get into it and ask, things like, first I start off by saying like, what are your non-negotiables? Like what are the things that you absolutely want in a school. And you'd be surprised how many kids I call from like, say, like Texas, who are like, I really want to be within 3 hours from home. I'm
Oh,
like, okay, well,
yeah.
I'm not that.
Right.
We are not at Rochester. We are not three
3 hours
hours from your
from,
home.
yeah.
Um,
Geographically speaking, it's not possible.
yeah. And, I've had conversations with student athletes where it's gone that route. But then I also ask, like, like I said, distance from home, what size of school you want, what do you want to do for a major, how important is your academics for you? And again, that's something that specifically at Rochester is really important to us. Um, Also, like, the question I always ask is how important is basketball in this process? Is this something you absolutely want, or is it something that, like, if it works out, you'll do both? Because that's really valuable to me too. Like, I want student athletes who choose Rochester, obviously, because of the academic reputation and what they want to do on that side of things. But I want them to really want to play basketball too, and not just have that be like a secondary. Oh, I'm just playing because I can, and why not? I want them to really care about both.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that question. And I love that you ask that, because the way that I think about it is there's like 4 or 5 fit criteria that I think of in my head. And you kind of rattle them off, like location, size, basketball, academics, and just like those types of things. And the way that I think about it is like, as a student athlete, you need to rank those things in your head. Like, if location is number one, then that is your number one choice. Like, that's the number one in your head. And if basketball is number four, that you need to know that information for when you're making a decision. And I do believe that there's a right fit for everybody out there. So I'm glad that you asked that question, because I think that is a very important question, even if they hadn't thought about it, for them to just reflect on, like, oh, how important is basketball in this decision-making process?
Yeah. And I mean, it changes for everybody, right? Like, we have a first year on our team this year who she was our starting point guard all year as a first year, a really, really talented basketball player who she's from New Jersey. And she originally was like, I don't want to go more than 3 hours from home. And on our first phone call, she was very honest with me. She was like, Rochester's kind of far.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that we checked every other box for her. And so I was like, just come visit, because I knew every other box was checked. And so I thought, might as well take the visit. Do I think we're going to get her if we're that far? I don't know, but it's worth the risk. Like, I'm not going to say no to a kid just because one of the boxes doesn't check. Right. And obviously she ended up at Rochester, and
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
I know, loves it, and the team loves her, and she's a great fit for our program and our school. But I think that, if it's really important for a kid to be willing to be honest with coaches about what's important to them, and for what's a non-negotiable of, like, absolutely not, like, I will not do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to go more than 3 hours from home, or I don't want a big school or something like that, versus like, I'm really hesitant to go 3 hours, but like, I'm willing to, like, explore it,
Yeah.
kind of
And I'm
thing.
I'm I'm glad you said that too, because I think a lot of times we think we know, it's just like the two sides of every coin, right? We think we know what we want until maybe our perspective shifts, or we find out some new information. And I said this on another episode too. I said, like, I always said I do not want to live in a city. I don't want to go to a school in a city. And I ended up like in grad school and stuff, I ended up going to a school in like basically Center City, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was great. Like, I liked the area. Everything was easily accessible. And so it's just like, had I in that moment cut off that option just because of one thing, I would have gone somewhere else and maybe not have had a good experience or whatever it was. So I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it is important to say, okay, let me just, if every other box is checked, let's just see, explore this maybe a little bit.
And especially, like, again, you have to rank your non-negotiables, like you said, right? Because, like, if there are some student athletes who location is their number one, and they do not want to be within a, say, 2 hour radius of home. And if that's your number one thing, that's your number one thing. But if, academics and school size and for us specifically, a lot of players really love our league, like league, that sort of stuff, all rank higher than that, then yeah, I would say at least take the drive out to the school, because then you'll be able to see like, okay, can I do this? Is this doable for me? Just, it all depends. It's different for everyone.
Yeah. No,
but
for sure. Yeah.
I think another important point too is like, at the end of the day, every student athlete individually is the one that's living their experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their parents aren't living it for them. Their AAU coach isn't living it for them. Their trainer's not living it for them. They are the ones that have to be there every day. So at the end of the day, it should come down to what's most important to them. And that stretches farther than, obviously, we talked about like location and school size and academics and all that stuff like off the court, but it goes onto the court as well. And like I'll give you an example for me. Like, I'll be straight up honest. You can go and look at my stats from college. They're not good. I didn't play a lot. I was not one of the best players on my team. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because what I wanted that was really important to me, and I was lucky enough to have mentors that really pushed me to be honest with myself, is I wanted to go to a school that won. That was really, really important to me. And I knew I could go to a school that wasn't as successful and I was going to play a lot.
Right.
Or I could go to a school that won and went to NCAA tournaments, which is something that I really, really wanted. It was extremely important to me, and could be part of that and be able to experience what it's like to be on a team that is that successful, knowing that I probably wasn't going to play as much. And, obviously I would have loved to play more. Like, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I knew that like I was willing to sacrifice that for winning. And I think a lot of student athletes see it just in front of them of like, I want a scholarship, or I want, to be in this league, or I want to like be part of this program. And they don't take a step back and say like, okay, when all of that's gone, what is actually the most important thing to me? Like, am I going to be okay at that one Division I school that offered me if I'm not really playing, if it's not in the location I wanted?
Mm-hmm.
Am I not? Because the answer is different. Some kids, it's yes. Being Division I athlete is the most important thing to me, absolutely, bar none.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. That's completely okay.
Yeah.
But then there's some kids who say, you know what, like, and we have them on our own team who said, you know what, that Division I offer, I'm really excited and, honored that I got it. But these Division III schools check so many more of my boxes. And they chose to go down that route. So again, it's just really comes down to like looking in the mirror and being honest with what you as a student athlete really want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about running your own race. Like, don't worry about, and it's easy to say, hard to do. Don't worry about like all that other stuff. It's like you said, at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow, can you live with those decisions? Are they the ones that you want to do? And like, I just thought of this right now. It's like, if nobody ever knew, what would be the decision that you would make, right? Like, if you didn't have to tell anybody else what decision it was, if social media did not exist and you didn't have to tell anybody what was going on, what is the route that you would take? Because like you said, if being a Division I athlete is your most important thing and you will sacrifice anything to that, that's okay. That's what you want. And if you get all these offers and you would rather play at a Division III school because of academics, that's okay. Like, that's what you want, because you need to set yourself up for the life you want to live, not necessarily like maybe there's pressure or something. I'm not sure, but yeah, like, just run your own race is like the biggest thing. So
yep. That's if our student athletes could take away anything, like that's the number one thing, is like, what is most important to you at the end of the day? Because you're the one that's living those 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. When student athletes are coming on a visit, like what does that look like for you all? What are you looking for them to do? Like what types of things stick out to you, good or bad?
So the first thing is, I love when student athletes have like a good personality and it shows that they want to be there, right? I'm not necessarily looking for, like, I understand not every person is like the most like, hey, how are you? Like, I get that, right? I'm not
Yeah.
asking anyone to be somebody they're not, but you can tell right away if a kid is there because their parents forcing them to be there, or if they're there because they truly want to be there. And that's really important to me. I would say the other thing too is asking questions that the answer is important to you and not asking questions just because you think you should have a question.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot where I can tell a kid is asking a question because, oh, okay, well, I should have a question. And I don't know. So let me just ask. And think about your questions ahead of time. If you are really have no questions for the coaches, again, this is something that coaches may disagree with, but if you don't have any questions, you don't have any questions.
Mm-hmm.
But think about it beforehand and say, okay, do I have questions? If so, what are they? And actually take the time to, have that process in your head is definitely really, really valuable to me. But yeah, I would say overall, just like being engaged is like the number one thing. And then obviously the question thing, like I always remember when student athletes, one, ask really good questions,
Mm-hmm.
and two, ask like very specific questions that I can tell they like did their homework.
Can you think of off the top of your head, like some of your favorite questions that you've ever been asked?
Um, I mean, I like when they ask like stuff about like the season or like our team history specifically. When they ask about like our head coach and like his success and track record shows that they've done that research. And also like things like as far as academics and like specific things about like specific programs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think like I don't remember if I can remember like anything like specific like on the spot. I'll like think of it in like an hour and be like, hey, shut
That's
up.
okay.
But like I would say in general, like the theme is like just like questions that have shown they've done their research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always try to think about it like not don't, but try not to ask questions that you can find the answer on the website.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, did you actually look up the school? Like, do you know like why you're here kind of? And I know that sometimes you do, and that's okay, but in general, that's kind of what I would try to avoid. And are
Yeah.
there any questions that you all ask every student athlete that comes on a visit?
I mean, like I said, the non-negotiables for sure
Mm-hmm.
are definitely another question that we reiterate
Okay.
while we're there. We usually ask too, this is an interesting one too. I feel like we always ask what other schools that student is looking at. And I think this is something that's really valuable for student athletes to know is like we're not asking like to try and like pry and get information. And I think sometimes people are like a little like hesitant to say what other schools they're looking at.
Right.
It's more for like a kind of like comparison, right? Like for example, if like Rochester is considered an urban campus, even though we are, I would say, a very like true like college campus, but we're technically located in a city, right?
Right.
So if a student athlete names 5 schools that are all like very rural and then Rochester, then it begs the question of, oh, so you visited those 5 schools. Like, did you like that kind of rural environment? If so, how does that compare to Rochester? And that's not something we would know if we didn't ask where else they visited.
Yeah.
And so it's more for like that reason to kind of get a gauge of like what is really important to the student athlete. What are some things maybe they're not saying that are important that you can tell based on the schools that they visited? Or like, where are they at in the process? Have they visited 10 schools already? Are we their first visit? That helps gauge their timeline as well. So it's never be afraid to tell coaches where else you're looking. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
No one's judging you.
Yeah.
It's okay,
Yeah, I
but it
agree.
is good information.
Yeah. And do you, in terms of like visits, do you like to be a kid's first visit?
I It's an interesting question. I do.
I asked because we always said we want to be their first or their last. We don't want to be in the middle.
I'll be honest. I think being a first is nice, but I believe so much in Rochester and what we offer.
Hmm.
I think that we're offering a great product no matter when you visit. And so I think that that's, really important. And like at the end of the day, I want people to choose Rochester because they love U of R and this is where they want to be. So ultimately, I don't really care too much. I think it's nice when it's a first visit, but I care way more about like, did you walk away having that gut feeling of, yeah, this could be a place I could see myself.
Hmm.
Because like I said, I really do believe in U of R and what we offer here.
Yeah, and it's fit, right? Like if it's a good fit from a first visit, it should be a good fit from a middle or last or whatever visit it is. So yeah, I would agree with that too. Switching gears a little bit towards social media.
Yeah,
What if you, based on your experience, do you think there is a platform that you use more often than other platforms? I'm specifically honestly thinking of like Instagram and X.
yeah. I was about to say Twitter, as I still
Yeah.
call it Twitter. Um, but people think, I mean, my players think I'm crazy when they ask me if I only could have one social media account, what would I keep? And I always say, well, X, Twitter,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's mostly for like work purposes. It's so easy to find information. It's easy to see kids highlights. Like, I know coaches will say this, but if I'm watching a kid play at a tournament and I'm intrigued, the very first thing I do is search their name on Twitter or
Hmm.
X. Sorry, I'm gonna keep doing
I
that.
mean, it's not my company, so you're good.
Yeah. Um, the very first thing I do, and then I can look and see, okay, like where are they at academically? Do they have offers? Are they already committed? That sort of thing. Do they have highlights there? And it's a really quick, easy way to find information about a prospective student athlete.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question then, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. So let's say you're at a tournament watching a kid, you're like, man, I like them. I think they're good. You search them on X and you find out immediately, like, oh, they probably wouldn't be a good fit for Rochester. In that moment, if you're like, but I think they would be a good fit for my friends at whatever school, do you pass along that information?
100%. Um, I've done that a bunch. I've had people do that for me. I think coaching is definitely a profession where you build really strong connections with people at other schools, because they can relate so much to what you're going through in your day-to-day life. This. So I want to help my friends out, right? And if somebody's not a fit for me, but they're a fit for my friend, 100%, I'll share it with my friend. And at big events, especially if they're at the same event as me, I'll text them and say, like, go watch this kid on this team. She plays again at 1 o'clock.
Hmm. So I'm glad that you said that because I think honestly most coaches would do that. So
I agree.
yeah, and that it's like so I want student athletes to know that when they see like let's say they're not interested in Rochester, they're not interested in whatever school, and they're at their game and they think, oh, I can slack off or do whatever. It's like that you might have 25 schools watching you with that one coach watching you because they know it's a small community. They know however many people at all different levels. It's not just a Division
Yep.
three school knowing Division three coaches, coaches at all different levels. And so you have no idea who's watching you when you're playing. And that is a stressful part of it, right? Like you always have to be on, you always have to be whatever. But like
Yeah.
recognize and understand that just because Rochester is watching you, that could be 25 other schools watching you at the same time because you may pass along that information. And I think that's something that's really important. And I don't know if a lot of student athletes think about it in that way either.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, like I think student athletes would be surprised to know how many coaches know each other and how good of friends a lot of us coaches are.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's its own little community because it's like you said, it's a lifestyle more than a job. So
Yeah.
it's when you have a job like that, It's just like different bonds will be formed. So let me ask you this question, and it's kind of going back to student athletes reaching out to you and you reaching out to them.
Yeah.
If you think about the roster on Rochester right now, what would you say, and you can think about other schools too, but what would you
Mhm.
say is the percentage of student athletes that made contact with you first versus you making contact with them first?
Well, I can speak specifically our current first years and then our incoming first years
Okay,
are the only people that I can really speak to because before that I wasn't here to recruit them.
right.
But our current first years, I'm pretty sure all four of them reached out to us.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit to the transition into college. And I know that that transition process in general, it can be really, really stressful. Like, what are some proactive strategies you can recommend for athletes to excel on and off the court?
Yeah. I think the number one thing is find a mentor who's been through the process. Like I was even talking to one of our student athletes a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about something that she was really, frustrated with during the season. And she called her two older sisters who both played in college, and both of them were like, "Yeah, we did that too. Yeah, I did that. That's normal."
Yeah.
And she was like, it gave me a little bit of reality check of like, oh, okay, like I shouldn't complain about this. This is normal. And I think, people who have older siblings are lucky. They kind of just have that built in. But finding a friend or even a teammate that you can kind of go to that's been through that transition process as a student athlete, that you can go to and they understand what you're going through, but also have gotten to the other side of, past that freshman year, which is really tough.
Yeah.
And have kind of seen, the other side, like I said.
Hmm. And so so I guess that could work for on and off the court, but I guess like what are some things that you're looking for on the court for first years to do like that summer leading up to their first year?
Yeah. I love when they find pickup with current college students. Because or like a league or something. Because the college game is just like bigger, faster, stronger, right? And it's one of those things that you just don't know until you know.
Hmm.
So being able to pick up a league, whatever get runs in with players who already are playing at that college pace, I think is really helpful for when you adjust then to going to college and having to have to play at that pace. The other not paced. Sorry. The other thing too is really prioritizing the weight room and conditioning. Don't get me wrong, skills are really important and you should be working on them, but what's going to set you apart physically is going to be your ability to defend, your ability to physically compete with the other players at this level.
Yeah, and it's like getting your body right. That is like
Mm-hmm.
I think just the most important thing is just making sure that you can withstand an entire season of, however many practices and getting beaten up pretty much every day by people who are 2, 3, 4 years older than you and have been going through that body transformation in terms of like strength and speed for much longer. So yeah, I I love that suggestion of just like conditioning and weights or, push-ups or something to
Yeah,
try to get like your body ready because it's a lot of bump and grind like throughout the season for
1000%.
sure. All right, so I have a last couple questions that I do ask all the guests that come on. So what book or podcast would you recommend every incoming first year read or listen to before their first year begins, and why?
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is 101 Questions to Ask Yourself in Your 20s by Paul Agnon. And obviously you're coming into college at 18, right? So you're
Yeah.
not in your 20s yet.
Close, you're
But I
close.
but I think so much about college is discovering who you are. And that's in a variety of ways, right? That's as a human, that's as an athlete, that's as a leader, as a student, all of that. And the way the book is set up is it asks very introspective questions about like, why do you do what you do? Why are your passions the way they are? Why do you think the way you think? Like, who are you? And I think that that's really valuable information. And I think it's hard at 18, 19 years old to really look inward and be that introspective. So a book like that, I think, really almost forces you to do that, and ask yourself those hard questions about the end of the day, when all it's said and done, like, what are my values? What at my core is the most important thing to me? So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that book out because I don't know if I've heard of it, but it sounds really interesting.
yeah, Rudy Bentley, who's PGC guy, gave it to me. Right, actually, when I was finished college and I was kind of in that process of, finding myself and whatnot. It like that book changed my life. Like it really did.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So shout out Rudy.
So what, and you did mention one thing, so if you want to repeat it, that's cool, but or you can say something different. What is something about the recruiting process or transition to college that you believe that other coaches might disagree with?
I mean, going off of what I was saying before is like, at the end of the day, I want student athletes to find the right fit for them. And I understand that while I would love for the kids that I really want to come play for us, for that perfect fit to be Rochester, I understand that it's not, and for everyone. And I don't have a problem, admitting that. Like if there's a student athlete who I think is a really talented basketball player, but they don't necessarily like what they want isn't what we offer, I'll say very early in the process, like, I think you're a super talented player. I think you could really help us. I don't know if we check your boxes. And I kind of leave it open to them of like, if you want to do more research about U of R, if you ever change your mind, I would absolutely love to talk to you. But I don't want to stress you out and waste your time if we can't offer you what you want in a school. And I think some coaches may say, well, it's your job to find out ways that you can find fits for them.
Right,
and
right.
That is, in my personal opinion, that is true in some instances, right? Like I'm not going to say no to a kid who we check 6 of their 8 boxes just because we don't check 2. But if their top 5 things, we don't offer any of them, I don't think that's fair to the kid. Like I want them to go to a school that they really love and that has the things that they want in their 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So last but not least, any final words of wisdom?
Like I kind of mentioned before, just be honest with yourself. You're the one that's going through this process, no one else. So if there's something that you in your gut know you want, it's okay. What's important to you is what's the most important thing in the process. It's the number one thing I tell people is be honest. It's okay.
Yeah.
It'll all work out.
Everything will be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So, if anybody wants to keep up with Rochester or find out more like about the program or whatever, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I'm on X at Coach Spaz. And you can just search Rochester WBB on both X and Instagram to find us. Another little plug is for anybody who is, interested in Rochester. You can email me at Coach Spaschak at sports.rochester.edu. Or also we are hosting a prospect camp on May 26th that, we definitely would love to have any student athlete who's interested in U of R attend.
Cool. Yeah, I think that was my next thing. If there's any other events or anything like that. So yeah, check out Coach on X. She might check you out first. I don't know. Sounds like it.
I am pretty active on X. I feel like I scroll through X like the kids now scroll through TikTok.
Yeah.
So
that's funny. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're looking for more specific recruiting advice based on your situation, head over to hoopsthroughlife.com today to schedule your free 30-minute strategy session with me. We will discuss where you currently are in the recruiting process, where you want to go, and create a plan to get you there. Again, that's hoopsthroughlife.com, THROUGHLIFE.com. And if you have any questions for me or questions you want me to ask future guests, you can email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com. That's EL@hoopsthroughlife.com. I look forward to hearing from you soon.